Hey, what's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Uh, my name is Michael Music. I am about to get started. I just need to go live on Facebook and Zoom. See if I can do that. All right, we are live on Zoom. Now let's go live on Facebook. Doo-doo-doo. Okay. Okay, cool. Oh no, broadcast failed. All right, let me try to end the Zoom. Okay. Okay, cool. So we are live on Facebook and YouTube. I tried to do the Zoom as well. However, I don't know if you can do Zoom and Facebook at the same time. I think I might need a streaming platform. With that being said, I'm going to continue reading Think and Grow Rich, Chapter 8, Decision. And before I get started, let me introduce myself. My name is Michael Music. I have recently graduated from Penn State University, and I went from being a student to now becoming a teacher. However, I don't want to teach this book, Think and Grow Rich, because I don't think I mastered any of it yet. Uh, what this group is a big community discussion, and I want you guys, the audience, to really give me some feedback, some input. What you learn, what you like from this story, because I think that this is a book that we can study forever, and I would love to get the community involved in it. With that being said, I will be reading Chapter 8, Decision, starting on page 203. And yesterday I read the first 4 pages, which was basically Napoleon Hill sets up Think and Grow Rich, where he tells it as it is, tells you how to really understand the mind and whatnot. And then he emphasizes it with a story. So today, we're going to be looking at a story of America and how America was started with a decision. And there's a story of Christopher Columbus finding America. That's not the story I'm talking about today. I'm talking about the story of 3 individuals that made a decision that we're going to break free from Great Britain, and we're going to start our own country known as the United States of America. And this is probably one of the most inspirational stories I have ever read in my life, because not only did they make a decision, they made a decision with full knowledge, knowing that their lives were on the line. And I am more than excited to get to share this with you folks here today. And with that being said, ideally, I want to get this reading done in about 20 to 30 minutes. It is a little bit of a longer story, but then I'd love to hear you guys' feedback and input on it. So let's get started. Chapter 8, Decision, Freedom or Death on a Decision. So this is going to be a whole story. I'm not going to really stop in between telling the story, but at the end, I'll give my little inputs on it. Freedom or death on a decision. The value of decisions depends on the courage required to render them. The great decisions, which served as the foundation of civilization, were reached by assuming great risk, which often meant the possibility of death. Lincoln's decision to issue his famous Proclamation of Emancipation, which gave freedom to the colored people of America, was rendered with full understanding that his act would turn thousands of friends and political supporters against him. He knew too that the carrying out of the proclamation would mean death to thousands of men on the battlefield. In the end, it cost Lincoln his life. That required courage. Socrates' decision to drink the cup of poison rather than compromise in his personal belief was a decision of courage. It turned time ahead 1,000 years and gave the people then on board the right to freedom of thought and speech. The decision of General Robert E. Lee, when he came to the parting way with the Union and took up the cause of the South, was a decision of courage, for he well knew that it might cost him his own life, that it would be surely cost the lives of others. But the greatest decision of all time, as far as any American citizen is concerned, was reached in Philadelphia on July 4th, 1776, when 56 men signed their names to document which they well knew would bring freedom to all Americans, or leave every one of the 56 hanging from the gallows. So this is a pretty cool story because when in life have we made decisions where our lives are on the line? So this whole story, like death is a possibility if this decision was wrong. You heard the famous document, but you may not have drawn from it the great lessons in personal achievement it so plainly taught. We all remember the date of this momentous decision, but few of us realize what courage that decision required. We remember our history as it was taught. We remember dates and the names of men who fought. We remember Valley Forge and Yorktown. We remember George Washington and Lord Cornwallis, but we know little of the real forces back of these names, dates, and places. We know still less of that intangible power which ensured us freedom long before Washington's armies reached Yorktown. We read the history of the Revolution and falsely imagined that George Washington was the father of our country, that it was he who won our freedom, while the truth is, Washington was only an accessory after the fact, because victory for his armies had been ensured long before Lord Cornwallis surrendered. This is not intended to rob Washington of any of the great glory that he so richly merited. Its purpose, rather, is to give greater attention to the astounding power that was the real cause of his victory. It is nothing short of a tragedy that the writers of history have missed entirely even the slightest reference to the irresistible power which gave birth and freedom to the nation destined to set up new standards of independence for all the peoples of the earth. I say it is a tragedy because it is the self-same power which must be used by every individual who surmounts the difficulties of life and forces life to pay the price asked. Let us briefly review the events which gave birth to this power. The story begins with an incident in Boston, March 5th, 1770. British soldiers British soldiers were patrolling the streets, by their presence openly threatening the citizens. The colonists resented armed men marching in their midst. They began to express their resentment openly, hurling stones as well as epithets at the marching soldiers until the commanding officer gave orders: fix bayonets, charge. The battle was on. It resulted in death and industry of it resulted in the death and injury of many. The incident aroused such resentment that the Provincial Assembly, made up of prominent colonists, called a meeting for the purpose of taking definite action. Two of the members of that assembly were John Hancock and Samuel Adams. Long live their names. They spoke up courageously and declared that a move must be made to eject all British soldiers from Boston. Remember this: a decision in the minds of two men might properly be called the beginning of the freedom from which we of the United States now enjoy. Remember too that the decision of these two men called for faith and courage because it was dangerous. Before the assembly adjourned, Samuel Adams was appointed to call on the governor of the province, Hutchinson, and demand the withdrawal of British troops. The request was granted and the troops were removed from Boston, but the incident was not closed. It had caused a situation destined to change the entire trend of civilization. Strange, it is not, how the great changes, such as the American Revolution and the World War, often have their beginnings in circumstances which seem unimportant. It is interesting also to observe that these important changes usually begin in the form of a definite decision in the minds of a relatively small number of people. Few of us know the history of our country well enough to realize that John Hancock, Samuel Adams, and Richard Henry Lee of the province of Virginia were the real fathers of our country. Richard Henry Lee became an important factor in this story by reason of the fact that he and Samuel Adams communicated frequently by correspondence, sharing freely their fears and their hopes concerning the welfare of the people of their provinces. From this practice, Adams conceived the idea that a mutual exchange of letters between the 13 colonies might help to bring about the coordination of efforts so badly needed in connection with the solution of their problems. 2 years after the clash with the soldiers in Boston in March 1972, Adams presented this idea to the Assembly in the form of a motion that a correspondence committee be established among the colonies, with definitely appointed correspondents in each colony for the purpose of a friendly cooperation for the betterment of the colonies of British America. Mark well this incident. It was the beginning of the organization of the far flung power destined to give freedom to you and to me. The mastermind had already been organized. It consisted of Adams, Lee, and Hancock. I tell you further that if two of you agree upon the earth concerning anything for which you ask, it will come to you from my Father who is in heaven. The Committee of Correspondence was organized. Observe that this move provided the way for increasing the power of the mastermind by adding to it men from all the colonies. Take notice that this procedure constituted the first organized planning of the disgruntled colonists. In union, there is strength. The citizens of the colonies had been waging disorganized warfare against the British soldiers through incidents similar to the Boston riot, but nothing of benefit had been accomplished. Their individual grievances had not been consolidated under one master mind. No group of individuals had put their hearts, minds, and souls and bodies together in one definite decision to settle their difficulty with the British once and for all. Until Adams, Hancock, and Lee got together. Meanwhile, the British were not idle. They too were doing some planning and masterminding on their own account with the advantage of having back of them money and organized soldiery. The Crown appointed Gage to supplant Hutchinson as the governor of Massachusetts. One of the new governor's first acts was to send a messenger to call on Samuel Adams for the purpose of endeavoring to stop his opposition by fear. We can best understand the spirit of what happened by quoting the conversation between Colonel Fenton, the messenger sent by Gage, and Adams. Colonel Fenton, I have been authorized by Governor Gage to assure you, Mr. Adams, that the governor has been empowered to confer upon you such benefits as would be satisfactory. Endeavor to win Adams by promise of bribes, upon the condition that you engage to cease in your opposition to the measures of the government. It is the governor's advice to you, sir, not to incur the further displeasure of his majesty. Your conduct has been such as makes you liable to penalties of an act of Henry VIII, by which persons can be sent to England for trial for treason or misprision of treason at the discretion of a governor of a province. But by changing your political course, you will not only receive great personal advantages, but you will make your peace with the king. Samuel Adams had the choice of two decisions. He could seize his opposition and receive personal bribes, or he could continue to run the risk of being hung. Clearly, the time had come when Adams was forced to reach instantaneously a decision which could have cost him his life. The majority of men would have found it difficult to reach such a decision. The majority would have sent back an invasive reply, but not Adams. He insisted upon Colonel Fenton's words of honor that the colonel would deliver to the governor the answer as exactly as Adams would give it to him. Adams' answer: "Then you may tell Governor Gage that I trust I have long since made my peace with the King of Kings. No personal consideration shall induce me to abandon the righteous cause of my country. And tell Governor Gage it is the advice of Samuel Adams to him no longer to insult the feelings of an exasperated people. Comment as to the character of this man seems unnecessary. It must be obvious to all who read this astounding message that its sender possessed loyalty of the highest order. This is important. Racketeers and dishonest politicians have prostituted the honor for which such men as Adams died. When Governor Gage received Adams' caustic reply, he flew into rage and issued a proclamation which read, "I do hereby, in His Majesty's name, offer and promise His most gracious pardon to all people who shall forfeit, lay down their arms, and return to the duties of peaceable subjects, excepting only for the benefit of such pardon, Samuel Adams and John Hancock, whose offenses are of too flagitious a nature to admit of any other consideration, but that the condign punishment, as one might say in modern slang, Adams and Hancock were on the spot. The threat of the irate governor forced the two men to reach another decision, equally as dangerous. They hurriedly called a secret meeting of the staunchest followers. Here, the mastermind began to take momentum. After the meeting had been called to order, Adams locked the door, placed the key in his pocket, and informed all present that it was imperative that a Congress of the colonists be organized and that no man shall leave the room until a decision for such a Congress had been reached. Great excitement followed. Some weighed the possible consequences of such radicalism, aka old man fear. Some expressed grave doubt as to the wisdom of so definite a decision in defiance of the crown. Locked in that room were two men immune to fear, blind to the possibility of failure, Hancock and Adams. Through the influence of their minds, the others were induced to agree that, through the Correspondence Committee, arrangements should be made for a meeting of the First Continental Congress to be held in Philadelphia on September 5th, 1774. Remember this date. It is more important than July 4th, 1776. If there had been no decision to hold a Continental Congress, there could have been no signing of the Declaration of Independence. Before the first meeting of the new Congress, another leader in a different section of the country was deep in the throes of publishing a summary view of the rights of British America. He was Thomas Jefferson of the province of Virginia, whose relationship to Lord Dunmore, or the representative of the Crown in Virginia, was as strained as that of Hancock and Adams with their governor. Shortly after his famous Summary of Rights was published, Jefferson was informed that he was subject to prosecution for high treason against His Majesty's government. Inspired by the threat, one of Jefferson's colleagues, Patrick Henry, boldly spoke his mind, concluding his remarks with a sentence which shall remain forever a classic: "If this be treason, then make the most out of it." It was such men as these who, without power, without authority, without military strength, without money, sat in solemn consideration for the destiny of the colonies beginning at the opening of the First Continental Congress and continuing at intervals for 2 years until June 7th, 1776. Richard Lee arose, addressed the chair, and to the startled assembly made this motion: "Gentlemen, I make the motion that these united colonies are, and of right ought to be free and independent states, that they be absolved from an allegiance to the British crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved. Lee's astounded motion was discussed fervently and at such length that he began to lose patience. Finally, after days of argument, he again took the floor and declared in a clear, firm voice, Mr. President, we have discussed this issue for days. It is the only course for us to follow. Why then, sir, do we longer delay? Why still deliberate? Let this happy day give birth to an American republic. Let her arise, not to devastate and to conquer, but to reestablish the reign of peace and of law. The eyes of Europe are fixed upon us. She demands of us a living example of freedom that may exhibit a contrast in the felicity of the citizen to the ever increasing tyranny. Before his motion was finally voted upon, Lee was called back to Virginia because of a series of family illness, but before leaving, he placed his cause in the hands of his friend, Thomas Jefferson, who promised to fight until favorable action was taken. Shortly thereafter, the President of Congress, Hancock, appointed Jefferson as chairman of a committee to draw up a Declaration of Independence. Long and hard the committee labored on a document which would mean, when accepted by the Congress, that every man who signed it would be signing his own death warrant. Should the colonies lose in the fight with Great Britain, which was sure to follow, the document was drawn, and on June 28th, the original draft was read before the Congress. For several days, it was discussed, altered, and made ready. On July 4th, 1776, Thomas Jefferson stood before the assembly and fearlessly read the most momentous decision ever placed upon paper. When in the course of human events it is necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and nature's God entitled them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. When Jefferson finished, the document was voted upon and accepted, and signaled by the 56 men, every one of them staking his own life upon his decision to write his name. By that decision came into existence a nation destined to bring to mankind forever the privilege of making decisions. By decisions made in a similar spirit of faith, and only by such decisions can men solve their personal problems and win for themselves high estates of material and spiritual wealth. Let us not forget this. Analyze the events which led to the Declaration of Independence and be convinced that this nation, which now holds a position of commanding respect and power among all nations of the world, was born of a decision created by a mastermind consisting of 56 men. Note well the fact that it was their decision which ensured the success of Washington's armies, because of the spirit of that decision was in the heart of every soldier who fought with him, and served as a spiritual power which recognizes no such thing as failure. Note also with great personal benefit that the power which gave this nation its freedom is the selfsame power that must be used by every individual who becomes self-determining. This power is made up of the principles described in this book. It will not be difficult to detect in the story of the Declaration of Independence at least 6 of these principles: desire, decision, faith, persistence, the mastermind, and organized planning. Throughout this philosophy will be found the suggestion that thought backed by a strong desire has a tendency to transmute itself into its physical equivalent. Before passing on, I wish to leave you with the suggestion that one may find in this story and in the story of the organization of the United States Steel Corporation, a perfect description of the method by which thought makes an astounding transformation. In your search for the secret of the method, Do not look for a miracle because you will not find it. You will find only the eternal laws of nature. These laws are available to every person who has the faith and the courage to use them. They may be used to bring freedom to a nation or to accumulate riches. There is no charge save the time necessary to understand and appropriate them. Those who reach decisions promptly and definitely know what they want and generally get it. The leaders in every walk of life decide quickly and firmly. That is the major reason why they are leaders. The world has the habit of making room for the man whose words and actions shows that he knows where he is going. Indecision is a habit which usually begins in youth. The habit takes on a permanency as a youth goes through grade school, high school, and even through college without definiteness of purpose. The major weakness of all educational systems is that they neither teach nor encourage the habit of definite decision. It would be beneficial if no college would permit the enrollment of any student unless and until the student declared his major purpose in matriculating. It would be of still greater benefit if every student who enters the greatest schools were compelled to accept training in the habit of decision and forced to pass a satisfactory examination on this subject before being permitted to advance in the grades. The habit of indecision acquired because of the defiancies in our school systems goes with the student into the occupation he chooses, if in fact he chooses his occupation. Generally, the youth just out of school seeks any job that can be found. He takes the first place he finds because he has fallen into the habit of indecision. 98 out of every 100 people working for wages today are in the positions they hold because they lacked the definiteness of decision to plan a definite position, and the knowledge of how to choose an employer. Definiteness of decision always requires courage, sometimes very great courage. The 56 men who signed the Declaration of Independence staked their lives on the decision to affix their signatures to that document. The person who reaches a definite decision to procure the particular job and make life pay the price he asks does not stake his life on that decision. He stakes his economic freedom, financial independence, riches, desirable business, and professional positions are not within reach of the person who neglects or refuses to expect, plan, and demand these things. The person who desires riches in the same spirit that Samuel Adams desired freedom for the colonies is sure to accumulate wealth. In the chapter on organized planning, you will find complete instructions for marketing every type of personal services. You will find also detailed information on how to choose the employer you prefer and the particular job you desire. These instructions will be of no value to you unless you definitely decide to organize them into a plan of action. Oh, baby. All right. So that was Think and Grow Rich, Chapter 8, the story of America. And very interesting. So I want to ask you, what was one thing you learned and one thing you liked from that chapter? I will say that for me, I realized just from hearing that story, um, the decisions I'm making to do Thinking Grow Rich every day and to start my online business and really start working from social media, they were scary decisions for me, but it's all relative because these men that decided on signing their names to the Declaration of Independence, they decided I'm gonna stake my life onto this, and I don't. It's all or nothing for me. So what I'm getting from it is, yeah, I'm scared. I got like I'm making these decisions, but really, is my life on the line for this? Like, no, it is not. It is not. No one's going to murder me because I'm reading Think and Grow Rich and that I am pursuing my dreams. So that shows me what a true definiteness of decision was. And yeah, I'd love for you to go through this chapter. uh, think about decision in a new light and how we live, at least for the people I know that may be watching this. I'm not sure if this would reach internationally at some point, but we live in America, the greatest country ever born. And it came about from a definiteness of decision. And that is so cool to know. So, George Washington, he's a leader, and I am not trying to put him down, but it was John Hancock, Samuel Adams, and Robert E. Lee. Those three started a mastermind and made a definite of decision that we're going to go and we're going to break free from the British rule. And that is so cool for me to think about. So, what does this now inspire you to think about when it comes to decisions? And how would you feel now about making decisions? Is your life on the line, or is the decision you're going to make today to become more and do less, is that as scary as it seems, as these 56 men were to make the decision to sign their names to something they so believed in? And additionally, what other factors were a part of making this decision? Notice Napoleon Hill talked about organized planning. It was the mastermind between the three of them that branched out to the 56. Furthermore, it was a burning desire to have an independent country from British rule. I remember there were six total. So I want you to think about what were some of the factors that came into play when they made this definite decision that they were going to break free from British rule. And so yeah, that's pretty cool. So we're gonna end it off at the 31-minute mark. And yeah, I want to thank you guys for reading the story of how America came about. That was in chapter 8, Decision. So we just finished that. And tomorrow we're gonna focus now on one of my favorite chapters in the book, which is persistence. And we're going to see how far we can get with that live. So I want to thank you all for watching. I will see you. I suppose tomorrow I will read this around noon because of how it plays out with the calls in the morning leading up to this. And then my plan moving forward is to go back to 10 a.m. So thank you guys for listening to Think and Grow Rich with Michael Music Live. I will see you tomorrow at noon, and I wish you all the best. Bye for now. All right. So, ending this stream by YouTube. Have a great day, everybody. I'll see you